my name is Anna McIlmoyle,
And I'm Adam.
and the topic that we've chosen for today is how might Brexit affect sport in the UK. We thought that this would be a good relevant topic within politics of sport at the minute. Although it we haven't officially left just yet. Negotiations have started, and there's already concern about what might happen to sport once we leave.
So does anyone know what Brexit actually is?
Getting out of the EU.
Yeah, very good. So Brexit, that word is basically just a play on the two words British and exit, and it was a referendum was held the 23rd of June, and the decision was made for Britain to leave the EU. People who were pro-Brexit thought it was necessary to leave the EU to protect and restore the country's identity, culture and independence, and people that were remain thought it was better for the British economy, and that the concerns for immigration were not big enough to outweigh the consequences that Brexit may have.
So does anybody know what the Freedom of Movement Act is, or what it might mean? Take a guess.
Moving between countries.
Yeah, so basically the freedom of movement is that any EU citizen is able to move and live freely within a country within the European Union. And it's one of the founding principles of the European Union. NatSense Social Research did a poll with over 2,000 adults within the UK of what they thought about the Freedom of Movement Act within the UK. And of that, 68% of people wanted to abolish the Freedom of Movement Act from EU citizens moving in and out of the UK. However, 88% still wanted to maintain the free trade agreements that were in place. The FA Chairman's England Commission report that was published in 2014 suggested that the Freedom of Movement Act is really a one-way street. As you can see, 43% of the Spanish national team and 37% of the French national team played in the Premier League, but only one English national player plays outside of the UK. Does anybody know who that would be?
Joe.
Yeah, so Joe Hart's the only English player that doesn't play in a UK club. How many Scottish and Welsh players each do you think play outside of the UK as well?
One or two, Gareth Bale.
Yeah, so there's only one Scottish and one Welsh player as well. Okay, so at the minute, the Freedom of Movement Act allows the UK to benefit from the EU single market. For example, you moving sports goods in and out of the EU, which are free from tariffs and other barriers. The UK will now need to negotiate free trade agreements with a range of different countries, although this might take years to establish once the UK has left the EU, which in the interim could mean that the UK might end up suffering from tariffs and restrictions. This could mean that the UK sports business sector might suffer because they're going to face increases in tariffs and restrictions on moving their goods in and out of the UK, which would mean tariffs could also be on importing and exporting goods from the EU, which could in turn make them increase their costs, which could then lead to people not maybe buying as much goods.
So after Brexit, the UK may come across many financial problems because some of their money directly comes from the EU for funding, and their trade routes may be upset. Funding can be an issue because every year the UK spends 350 million on sports development, and some of that money comes directly from the EU as EU funding. The increase of sports equipment, or the increased cost of sports equipment because of the heavy tariffs that will come with the trade, could have a knock-on effect to grassroots. Grassroots could be impacted because if there's tariffs on sports equipment and the sports goods, people might be less interested because it's so costly to buy, and might stop younger people, like kids coming up, because they're not able to afford it, might stop them playing. With current focus on participation in communities, the increase in costs could be unhelpful to them, and some of the communities may suffer. Following Brexit, there might be an emergency budget put in. David Osborne said that there would have to be a public spending would have to be cut, but it's unclear whether that might actually affect sport. Between 2014 and 2016, 2.4 million has been awarded to the UK by the EU for 7 projects. The UK's eligibility to funding may be cut depending on negotiations. Some current non-EU countries are still eligible for funding, like Norway and Switzerland. They still qualify for some of the funding for programmes like the Erasmus Plus, which the UK currently get money for.
So some positives of Brexit for sport would be the potential for homegrown talent. So it would maybe allow room for athletes and players within the UK to step up and potentially allow funds to be spent on athlete development rather than big pay packages for EU players. Although it can be seen as a positive, does anybody think how homegrown talent can maybe be a negative at the current minute?
It's not as good as foreign talent, probably.
Yeah, exactly. So at the minute, many of UK players wouldn't actually meet the criteria that's set for EU players, and just because the EU players might have to leave doesn't mean that automatically the UK players are going to step up. They may potentially, but it's going to take time to develop those. The chief executive of the Leave campaign, Matthew Elliott, suggested that actually the EU is holding back the UK. For example, the UK currently, because of the restrictions that are imposed on non-EU players, the UK are missing out on talent from outside of the EU. For example, non-EU players have to be internationally proven to be even considered for a work permit. Financially, English clubs may not be challenged due to the successful TV deals they get through BT Sport and Sky Sports.
So the biggest impact of Brexit will probably be on football today. I want to hazard a guess how many players Brexit might affect and how many players will be eligible to play after Brexit. Guess.
All of them?
What?
All of them?
No, not all of them. I'm good up. After Brexit, 332 players won't actually be eligible to play in England or Scotland because of the restrictions. Currently, players with an EU passport can play anywhere in the EU, and when Britain leaves, these players won't be eligible with a work permit. To get a work permit in a top 10 nation, you have to if you're from a top 10 nation, you have to play 30% of games. From 11 to 20, you have to play 45% of games. If you're from the next 10 countries after that, you can play 60%, and from a 31 to 50 ranked nation, you have to play 75% of games. So that means 332 players across the UK won't actually be eligible to play without getting a work permit, and won't be able to get it. Britain could again be affected because of the regulations against the transfers of young players outside of the EU. Currently, Article 19, which allows transfers of players inside the EU but not outside. That means that the teams can miss out on players like Hector Bellerin, who was transferred to Arsenal at 16, and he's in their first team now. But despite that, it could create more recruitment for players outside of the EU. Because of the heavy restrictions on visas, players from Asia and the Caribbean and South America could get more opportunities to come over and play in the UK.
Okay, so do you think that the UK teams will still be able to play in the Euros? Yeah, they will. So basically, the sports immigration lawyer, Maria Patsalos, reassured fans that the UK teams will still be able to play in the European Championships because membership to the EU is irrelevant. And for example, Russia and Switzerland aren't part of the European Union, but they're still able to play in the Euros. Professor Raymond Boyle from the University of Glasgow described the Euros and the Champions League as two of the most high-profile expressions of shared European identity and culture. And being out of the EU will have little impact on elite football.
So just to summarise that, there's definitely a lot more negatives than what there is positives. The largest impact would be in football and the players inside the EU not being able to trade freely. If a hard Brexit was enforced and players could not move freely, the implications in the Premier League could be huge. Increase of costs of goods and sports equipment could have a knock-on effect to grassroots football, and losses of EU funding could end many projects such as Erasmus+. But despite that, it will have no impact on the Euros. It could put a focus on the homegrown talent, and there could be a more potential for recruitment outside of the EU, like clubs in Asia and South America.
Good. Well done.